She walks into the cafe and the air changes. Heads turn, conversations soften. Every man notices her. Every woman measures herself against her. She smiles, the kind of smile that says she's used to being seen. But there's something in her eyes that doesn't match the surface. A flicker of tension behind the confidence, like someone who's tired of performing perfection. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The most admired women are often the most unstable. Not because they're weak, but because their entire identity has been built on being noticed. The world taught them that visibility is value, and the moment the spotlight fades, so does their sense of self. This is the secret no one dares to say out loud. I met her at a friend's birthday dinner. She was the kind of woman who didn't just enter a room, she shifted it. Every man straightened up. Every woman suddenly became conscious of how they looked. She was stunning, yes, but it wasn't just that. It was the aura, the effortless laughter, the kind of social magnetism that made everyone orbit her without realizing it. At first, I thought she had it all figured out. She was confident, articulate, adored. But the longer I knew her, the more I noticed something strange. Her happiness was fragile. It cracked easily. One missed call, one photo without enough likes, one moment where she wasn't the center of attention, and she'd spiral. Subtly at first, a quiet withdrawal, a passive comment about feeling off, then eventually the full storm, insecurity, irritability, emotional collapse. One night, after everyone left a party, I found her sitting alone in her car staring at her phone. The glow of the screen lit up her face. Hundreds of messages, notifications, hearts, fire emojis, yet she looked completely hollow. I asked what was wrong. She sighed and said quietly, "If people stop noticing me, I disappear." That hit me harder than I expected, because it wasn't arrogance, it was fear. Pure, primal fear. She didn't want attention for vanity's sake. She needed it to feel real. Every compliment, every DM, every glance was a tiny breath of oxygen. Without it, she couldn't breathe. And the cruel part? The more she got, the shorter each breath lasted. It was like emotional asthma, temporary relief followed by deeper suffocation. I started seeing it everywhere. The women everyone admired were often the ones living on the edge emotionally, constantly checking, scrolling, adjusting, performing. They weren't chasing love, they were chasing proof of existence. That's when I understood something most men miss. Beauty isn't freedom. It's a contract. The world gives her validation but demands performance. The moment she stops performing, the applause dies and with it the illusion of worth. It's a pressure no one warns them about, the pressure to always be captivating, always desirable, always enough in a world where enough is never stable. That woman taught me more about female psychology than any book or therapist ever could. She showed me the invisible weight of being admired, the way it warps self-perception, rewires emotion, and quietly turns peace into dependency. And that's when the question formed, the one that still lingers every time I meet a woman who seems too perfect. What happens when someone who's been defined by attention finally runs out of it? Because that's when you find out who they really are, or if there's anything left beneath the applause. Here's what most people never understand about attractive women. Their instability isn't random, it's engineered. From the moment they're little girls, the world starts programming their nervous system to equate being seen with being safe. Every compliment, every approving glance, every moment of praise triggers a tiny surge of dopamine, a neurological reward that whispers, "You matter," when they notice you. Over time, that becomes the loop. And once the loop forms, it's almost impossible to break without consciousness. Imagine a young girl growing up being told she's beautiful. At first, it feels innocent, harmless. But soon, she notices something deeper. When she looks her best, people are kinder. Teachers are warmer, strangers are gentler. Validation becomes currency, not just for affection, but for belonging. Her subconscious learns that to stay loved, she must stay wanted. That's not empowerment, that's dependency disguised as admiration. Fast forward 10, 20 years, she's now an adult woman whose brain has been trained like a slot machine. Every new admirer, every social media like, every double take on the street hits the same neurological lever. She feels a spark, a pulse of relevance, but it fades quickly, leaving her restless and needing more. It's not vanity, it's chemical withdrawal, because in her brain, the absence of attention feels like emotional death. Here's the darker twist. The more attention she receives, the more tolerance she builds. Just like a drug user who needs a higher dose for the same high, she needs bigger reactions to feel desired. A few compliments don't do it anymore. Now she needs worship. The adoration that once made her glow now barely sustains her for a day. This is how instability grows, through constant emotional inflation. And it's not just biology, it's cultural conditioning weaponized. Society builds pedestals for beautiful women and then criticizes them for standing on them. We glamorize their visibility, then mock their breakdowns. We feed them validation, then shame them for needing it. It's psychological entrapment, a double bind. Be irresistible but never needy. Be admired but never insecure. Be perfect but pretend it's effortless. No human psyche survives that without damage. The paradox is that beauty amplifies everything, including emptiness. It doesn't fill the void, it just gives it better lighting. When her entire self-image depends on how others perceive her, she loses the ability to regulate internally. That's why one man's indifference can devastate her. It's not about the man, it's about what his lack of interest represents, invisibility. To her nervous system, that's rejection on a primal level. The evolutionary psychology behind it is brutal. For thousands of years, female survival was linked to being chosen. Protection, resources, security. The female brain still carries that imprint. But in modern times, being chosen happens through social validation, not survival instinct. So when attention fades, the brain interprets it as danger, even if consciously she knows better. Her emotions spiral because her biology still thinks being ignored equals extinction. This is the mechanism most people miss. Beauty doesn't create stability. It magnifies fragility. It turns her into both the admired and the imprisoned. Every new admirer strengthens the cage. Every moment alone shakes it. And yet, the tragedy isn't that she's trapped. It's that she doesn't even realize she is. She thinks she's chasing connection, but she's chasing regulation. She doesn't want love. She wants relief. The metaphor I always come back to is glass. Beautiful, transparent, admired. But under pressure, it shatters. The stronger the spotlight, the more cracks it hides until the whole thing explodes. That's what happens to many women whose identity has been built around attraction. They seem powerful, but power built on attention is temporary. It depends on the whims of others, and that dependency creates chaos within. So the next time you meet a woman who seems perfect, composed, magnetic, effortlessly admired, remember this. The higher she's placed, the less ground she has beneath her. Stability doesn't live in admiration, it lives in anonymity, in moments where she doesn't need to perform to feel seen. But few ever get to that point, because peace doesn't trend. This is the hidden architecture behind instability, not weakness, not drama, but a nervous system shaped by a lifetime of applause. If you want to understand the emotional instability of many attractive women, don't look at what they say, look at what they repeat. The patterns always tell the truth. The instability doesn't show up as chaos right away. It hides behind small, predictable behaviors that all orbit around one core addiction: the need to feel chosen again and again. It starts subtly. The woman who can't go a day without checking her phone, the one who posts a new photo every time she feels distant from her partner, the one who needs reassurance not because she doubts love, but because she doubts her reflection. The moment she feels unseen, something inside her starts to unravel. You'll notice she gets restless when things are calm. She doesn't crave peace, she craves stimulation. Because peace feels like silence, and silence feels like invisibility. Her relationships tend to follow the same rhythm: intense beginnings, emotional highs, and then sudden withdrawals. She's magnetic at first because she knows how to perform closeness. She knows the lines, the eye contact, the warmth that draws you in. But the moment real intimacy requires stillness, she panics. Stillness doesn't give her feedback. It doesn't mirror her. And for someone who's lived her whole life in reflection, that's unbearable. She might accuse you of pulling away even when you haven't. She'll start small arguments to feel you react. Not because she wants conflict, but because reaction proves relevance. Emotional friction is safer than emotional quiet. In a strange way, she feels more connected when there's tension, because tension reminds her that she still matters. You'll see this in her social behaviour too. She maintains a subtle orbit of attention around her. Exes she still checks in with. Friends who always flirt a little too much. Social posts designed to provoke response. It's not malice, it's maintenance. Every like, every message, every lingering look acts as a microdose of reassurance. Without those, she crashes. Even her self-sabotage has a pattern. She'll chase emotionally unavailable men not because she enjoys pain, but because their inconsistency feels familiar. The push-pull dynamic mimics her internal world, a constant swing between being adored and being ignored. The unavailable man keeps her nervous system activated, and activation feels like passion. A man who's consistent, calm, emotionally safe. She'll call him boring. Not because he is, but because her body doesn't know how to feel alive in stability. This is why the most beautiful women often say they don't know what happened when relationships collapse. They're not lying. They genuinely can't see the pattern because it's invisible from the inside. Their chaos feels like chemistry. Their anxiety feels like love. They confuse being triggered with being attracted, and by the time they realize the difference, they've already destroyed something good. Another sign is emotional intensity out of proportion to the moment. Small disappointments become proof of betrayal. Minor mistakes become personal attacks. She's not dramatic for attention, she's trying to regulate. Her nervous system is built around spikes, and when life flattens out, she unconsciously creates drama just to feel something again. Social media amplifies every one of these patterns. It gives her infinite mirrors, infinite ways to measure her worth and lose it again. The woman who seems most confident online is often the one most terrified of irrelevance. Her perfectly curated image isn't self-expression, it's self-preservation. Every post is a plea for emotional oxygen disguised as aesthetics. But here's the cruel irony. The very validation that keeps her stable also keeps her dependent. Every like feeds the loop, every admirer reinforces the addiction, and when that validation slows, the withdrawal feels like heartbreak, even when nothing has actually happened. That's why you'll often see her oscillate between empowerment and despair. One week she's invincible, the next she's broken. It's not mood swings, it's the biology of approval collapsing in real time. Underneath it all, she's not manipulative. She's terrified. Terrified of aging, of irrelevance, of being ordinary. Terrified that the world that once rewarded her will one day forget her completely. And so she fights it, every day, by staying in motion. She'll reinvent, rebrand, reframe, anything but stop. Because stopping would mean facing the question she's been avoiding her whole life. Who am I when no one is looking? That's the behavioural loop. A life built on performance, powered by insecurity, sustained by attention, and destroyed by silence. Every illusion has a breaking point. For the beautiful woman who's built her world on attention, that breaking point often arrives quietly, not in some dramatic explosion, but in a moment of stillness she can't escape. Maybe it's when her phone stops buzzing after a breakup. Maybe it's when she realizes the room doesn't light up the same way it used to. Maybe it's just the reflection in the mirror one morning, and for the first time she doesn't recognize the woman looking back. The shift is brutal because it feels like death, not physical but existential. The applause fades, and what's left isn't peace, it's panic. The same beauty that once opened doors now feels like a burden she can't maintain. She starts questioning everything, her choices, her worth, her relationships. It's not aging she fears, it's irrelevance. Because irrelevance means invisibility, and invisibility feels like erasure. This is the emotional test most of them fail, not out of weakness, but out of unpreparedness. No one teaches a woman how to exist beyond admiration. No one tells her that attention was never love, that validation was never value. So when it disappears, she doesn't just lose others, she loses herself. The crash can manifest as depression, impulsive decisions, affairs, reinventions that feel more desperate than liberating. Anything to escape the unbearable quiet of not being desired. I once spoke with a woman who had everything: beauty, status, influence. She confessed, "I know I'm loved, but I don't feel alive unless I'm being wanted." That's the addiction speaking, the same voice that drives the chaos. It's not about love or lust anymore, it's about regulation. Desire becomes the drug, and every moment without it feels like withdrawal. But the consequence is unavoidable. The emotional debt always comes due. Every time she builds her sense of self around external validation, she borrows from her future peace. Eventually the payments catch up, in anxiety, loneliness, resentment. She starts realizing that being admired isn't the same as being understood, and that the kind of a love she chased can't survive without constant performance. The cruel part is that she'll often double down before she wakes up. She'll push harder, post more, flirt bolder, chase stronger. She believes the next rush will fix the emptiness, but each one just deepens it. Until one day the chase stops working. The men stop reacting, the followers move on, the mirror stops flattering, and there it is, the truth. Not the glamorous, filtered truth the world told her, but the raw one she's been avoiding. She never learned how to exist without being wanted. That realization is the breaking point, but it's also the first moment of freedom. Because once the illusion collapses, she has a choice. Rebuild from reality or keep chasing fantasy. Most don't make it that far. But the few who do discover something extraordinary. That peace doesn't come from being desired, it comes from no longer needing to be. True transformation doesn't begin when she feels loved again. It begins when she stops craving to be seen. When she realizes that admiration was never affection, that validation was never intimacy, and that the constant chase for attention was never about connection. It was about survival. The moment that truth lands, the entire architecture of her identity starts to shift. It's not an easy awakening. For a woman who's lived through the highs of external worship, letting go feels like withdrawal from a drug. Her mind rebels. Her body craves the dopamine hit. The silence feels unbearable at first, but slowly something remarkable begins to happen. The quiet that once felt like rejection begins to feel like rest. The absence of attention stops feeling like death and starts feeling like freedom. This transformation requires unlearning everything the world conditioned her to believe. She has to dismantle years of programming, the belief that her beauty is her currency, that her desirability is her power, that her validation depends on being chosen. She learns to separate attention from affection, admiration from respect, and visibility from worth. For the first time, she begins asking, "Who am I without applause?" And that question, though painful, is the beginning of peace. In this new space, she starts redefining value, not by how much she can attract, but by how much she can sustain. Depth, honesty, calm. Her reflection becomes less about how she looks and more about how she feels. The mirror that once enslaved her becomes a witness to her growth. She starts doing things not to be seen but to feel alive, reading in silence, traveling without posting, nurturing friendships that exist beyond aesthetics. Every act of independence rewires her brain away from dependency. The irony is that once she no longer needs attention, she becomes genuinely magnetic. Not in the artificial, performative way that once drained her, but in a grounded, effortless way that radiates calm authority. Her energy changes. She stops chasing the male gaze and starts commanding respect. Men sense the shift immediately, not because she's playing hard to get, but because she's finally hard to shake. What most people never understand is that stability doesn't come from renouncing beauty. It comes from integrating it. True peace happens when she can appreciate her appearance without using it as armor, when she can enjoy being admired without depending on it for identity, when her worth is anchored so deeply in self-respect that no amount of external noise can disturb it. I once knew a woman who lived this transformation fully. She used to say, "For years, I thought I needed attention to feel alive. Now I need silence to remember who I am." That's the essence of the reframe, realizing that constant attention is chaos disguised as connection. What she mistook for love was adrenaline. What she thought was power was pressure. And what she feared losing, her desirability, was never the source of her value at all. When she finally sees that, she becomes untouchable. Not because she's unreachable, but because she's whole. The same woman who once couldn't go a day without validation can now go weeks without it and feel nothing but peace. Her stability no longer depends on her looks, her followers, or her relationships. It depends on something far rarer, emotional sovereignty. This is the woman who's truly dangerous to a shallow world, the one who doesn't perform, the one who doesn't need to be liked, the one whose self-respect has replaced her insecurity. She still attracts attention, but it's no longer her lifeline, it's her reflection, proof of the calm she carries within. And here's the quiet irony. The women who reach this level of inner stability are often the same ones the world once called unstable, because it's only through breaking, through losing every illusion of control, that they discover what real control feels like. It always starts with admiration and ends with exhaustion. The world taught her that beauty was a kind of currency, that being desired was the same as being valued. But no one told her the cost. No one told her that the more attention she collected, the less peace she'd keep. No one warned her that visibility without grounding turns into volatility, that being seen by everyone often means being known by no one. The secret reason attractive women are the most unstable isn't because they're vain or fragile. It's because they've been trapped in a system that trades emotional balance for external validation. Their reflection became their identity, and their applause became their oxygen. And you can't breathe freely when every inhale depends on someone else's gaze. But the story doesn't have to end there. Some learn to stop performing. They stop chasing the echo and start listening to the silence. They stop confusing admiration with affection, and finally understand the rarest form of power, the ability to stay centered when no one's watching. The truth is, every woman has a moment where she must decide, stay addicted to the illusion, or learn to love the stillness that once terrified her. Most never make that choice consciously. They keep dancing for attention long after the music stopped, but the few who do, they become something extraordinary. They become women who no longer need to be chosen to feel worthy. So if you ever meet a woman who no longer flinches at indifference, who smiles without performing, who no longer measures her worth by reflection or reaction, understand, you're not looking at someone who's cold. You're looking at someone who's finally free. Beauty fades, admiration shifts, but peace lasts. Because the most beautiful thing a woman can ever become is someone who no longer needs to be seen to know she exists.